I'll go ahead and get us started. So thank you all for coming. This is our ProLinkHFA Compliance Data Management Best Practices training event. So thank you again. I'll head right into our agenda and introductions for today. So here is our agenda. First 5 minutes is with me, general information, and then I'm going to hand it off for setting up compliance programs for about 40 minutes with Sarah and Kelly, and then additional set aside program review for about 10 minutes, tenant event import for compliance for 35 minutes, and then we're going to have a Q&A session towards the end for 30. So that is how we'll spend our time together. And then quickly going through our intros. I'm Bree Kruder. I'm the Executive VP for ProLink. And then I'm joined by Kelly Insinues, who's our Senior Product Manager for HFA. And then Sarah is our Customer Success Manager. Okay, and then heading right into general info. So to just kind of rehash and make sure everyone is understanding of how we run these sessions, if you've attended our previous webinars, generally those are about 45 minutes long, and we cover kind of a business topic, and then we have a presenter for a technical aspect also attached to those presentations. The schedule is every first Wednesday of each month for our HFA webinars up till October timeframe, and then we have our November month really just booking out time for our ProLink Tech Live conference, which is a multi-day training event for HFA. And this is really geared towards housing agencies nationally, and especially our clients who are using HFA. Topics will vary each month. And then on a quarterly basis, we're replacing our typical just 45-minute webinar with a larger training opportunity. So this is what today's session is that expanded time together to really get into some training on HFA. So thank you again for being here. Please continue to join these sessions. Please submit ideas if you'd like to see certain areas of our functionality or get training in these quarterly events. You can contact us directly. My information is towards the end of this presentation, and you probably have your go-to people at ProLink as well. So please make sure you reach out to us and let us know about those opportunities to better support you through these virtual events. Okay, and then I thought this would be a helpful slide for people. We oftentimes across our client base are asked to refresh people's memories on who actually is included in our user group, and who are voting members, and who are new clients who are going to be kind of joining the user group. So everybody is welcome. All ProLink HFA customers are welcome to participate in user group. Once our clients are live in production using ProLink HFA, you get to vote towards new features. So that's features where we establish a budget with our user group, and then you get to vote on new enhancements to our products as a group, as our peers, as the people using our system. So you can see the list at the top. Those are our current voting members, our current active clients who are in production live. And then we have some newbies who will be joining us in the next few months, some sooner than others. We have California DDS who will be joining hopefully as a voting member in the next couple of months. Rhode Island Housing is well on their way, so they're hoping to go live hopefully before the end of the year. And then Maine Housing is going through an implementation for HFA right now. We're expecting probably next year, early next year, for them to go live. So exciting to see that group grow, and new perspectives come into the picture for our ideas and our enhancing of the product. So thank you all for participating in that. All right, and then moving forward, I'm going to hand it off. The last thing I'll say is we do have Q&A. We have both the Q&A and the chat active. So if you have questions or comments, please socialize and share there. We'd love to get those, and we'll be compiling all of that and sharing it after the event. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Kelly and Sarah. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Kelly and I thought it would be a good idea, since it's compliance season, to go through some of our compliance program setup tips and tricks, and maybe a slightly deeper dive in some areas that we may not have covered in the initial training before you had context to how ProLinkHFA was going to be used in your process, and little bits and pieces that might shed light into some issues that we're receiving support tickets on, so we can kind of cover a few items. And like Bree said, that we are going to have a Q&A at the end of our overview. And you can go ahead, and if you're like me and you can't remember and you can't wait, just type it in the chat, and then we'll go through those as we get to the end. Some of this will be redundant for a lot of you who know, but just bear with us because you might learn something new. And if you did learn something new, let us know, because I think we both learned something new setting up this training, oddly enough.
Absolutely.
All right. So everybody knows when you first get a property in, if you're starting from the ground up, it's gone from TCA to asset management or from dev to asset management. The first thing you'll want to do is set up your programs. And whether that's LIHTC, home, additional set-asides, whatever programs that you have, you want to make sure those are on there before you start adding units to your property. Then we have BENS. You know that's how you use for reporting. If you've come from a TCA deal and you've done your PP update, the BENS and some of the building addresses and everything should already be on your property. But if that is not your process for this property or any properties in your portfolio, then this would be the manual way that you would do it.
And coming soon, maybe this summer, we're talking about the possibility of doing a little mini training on using that PP data update and kind of focusing in on that transition from from deals into asset management.
Yes, so it can make your life easier when it comes to data setup. Then obviously buildings, you'll set up buildings. Then you have your units. Then utility allowances, if those are applicable to your agency. After everything is set up, you can start setting up your compliance reviews. And then once compliance season starts, like it is right now, everybody's favorite, then your clients, your owner agents can start entering their tenant events in the tenant portal via XML or manually. So property setup for your programs. Most of you are familiar with where that's located in your selected property. Some items that you may or may not use that may have been something you've stumbled over since you first went live with ProLink is allow pre-program review. And this is something you would use in the case of AC rehab, where you're going to lease up or have tenants move in before you're actually beginning the program. If you need to do that on LIHTC, and I believe we can do this for home too, yes?
I think so.
Just to be sure, LIHTC allow pre-program review will allow your owner agents to enter tenant events and select LIHTC as a program before your compliance start date. We have your deep rent skew election items, which you may or may not have been using. You also need to lock those deep rent skew fixed units. After you set up your program, some of you have experienced receiving errors on an evaluation or a missing requirement when you don't do that. And you mark your units as fixed on your at the unit level. Something new that we have added upcoming, I believe this is in the last release, Q1, we have is average income as a checkbox. This is informational only.
Q2, I apologize, not Q1, Q2, this will be coming.
That's going to be in Q2, along with another thing to kind of get us ready for the eventuality that will be the average income program. This is what you'll check. Well, that'll be in the data view. So if you decide you have all these properties that are going to be applying to average income, you can just make a data view for reporting and know which ones that you're going to have to update when we do finally implement. This year, you may have also noticed in various places on some of your properties, there's a little orange bar that indicates these fields are going to be used for your HUD data collection. Now, there's a caveat to this one, and I'm going to show you really quick over here. In order to see these boxes on the property, you need to go into AM characteristics and you have to select this HUD LIHTC data collection box. At that point, then when you go into various areas, it's going to show you what's being collected for HUD. I'm trying to remember if we have one on Ben. I believe there's something on Ben. See, there we go. Orange bar indicates.
And we'll cover this in more detail again later this summer. We're going to do a training for the HUD data export. And so we'll cover that in some real fine detail. Again, probably we said, I think July.
That will be fun. Mark your calendars now, folks. So that's just kind of some of the screens you're going to find specifically on the LIHTC program screen. Then you have your home program screen, which is similar, except a little different. You have to select your fixed or floating values here on the program and how many units are going to be involved in the home calculation. If you do have fixed units and they are selected as fixed on the unit type, you absolutely have to put lock fixed units, because if you don't and you evaluate your review and you want to finalize it, the finalize button is going to be disabled. And the good news is we are adding a tooltip to let you know exactly what requirement is missing on the home program, so you don't have to guess. I know we've run into this a couple of times and figured out, oh, you have to lock your fixed units.
A little more detail there. Before you lock those fixed units, you've got to go hit your, like in this case, 12 units and really mark those units. And the reason that the system does that is so that when you do the compliance review, if your homeowner submits a tenant event into a unit and they mark it as home, but that unit is not a home unit per your program, why then the system can notify you that, hey, this owner agent is trying to use, unit 4 as a home unit, but the way they've defined their program with you, unit 4 is not a home unit. So that's the reason around that concept of locking those fixed units.
Just to keep everybody's ducks in a legal row.
Yep.
Got it. Or a compliance row, if you will.
Yep.
And I would highly suggest, if you have the option of setting this up, these values up before you create your units, because then it's going to auto-populate with the items you have in here. If they don't, and you add the home program later after you've got events and units, then you're going to have to manually do that via Smart Docs. Something else a new thing I learned in the past couple of weeks for your income. And then we're talking about the income and limits section. So now we have our properties set up with bends. You know that when you get the bends in a perfect world, if you're using TC deals to update your portfolio property, you're going to have all this information created already. Your federal minimum set aside, your BEN. Now, if you want to make a building or a multi-building project, let's say you have 20 buildings in a complex, but you want to allow for tenants to be able to transfer in between buildings without generating exception errors, or you can make that a multi-building project. And the only thing you have to do for that is select this little checkbox on the BEN. And we'll go over this here in a second if you haven't seen it before. That's the only thing you need to have that show up as an available BEN to add to a multi-building project. You don't have to put the credit amount. You absolutely can. I know that a lot of people do. But if you just want to get that into a multi-building situation, you can do that. You can also have more than one multiple building project per property. You cannot use the same BEN twice. Obviously the BEN has to be unique to the project. But if you need to do that for whatever reason, for scattered sites, perhaps, that might be a way to use it.
Maybe.
I know we've seen some clients who have multiple building projects, more than one on their properties for compliance, and to evaluate and keep track of. Going back to average income, please don't get too excited. The IRS still hasn't given us the go-ahead yet. However, we are preparing for the eventuality that the IRS is going to provide us with guidance to create the average income program. So we've added a temporary configuration setting into ProLinkHFA. When it's set to true and you have selected average income as a set aside on the BEN, it's just going to be tested using the 40/60 set aside. If you set that to false in config settings of ProLinkHFA, it's not going to evaluate income and rent or NAUR. So what is your suggestion?
Our recommendation is that regardless, whether you choose to test, the standard 40 at 60 set aside that you normally select on the LIHTC program, our recommendation is that you set up your average income program within the additional set asides programs. And we're going to dive into a real detailed example of that here a little bit later this afternoon.
I'm very excited.
Yes.
So yes, when you do see this in Q2 and it comes to you, don't panic. If you forget that we had this conversation, reach out with support ticket, let us know, we can talk you through it, right?
Absolutely. And this is just, some folks kind of requested this for a matter of reporting right now, but this is also going to help you mark those properties, right? So that when the time comes, and you do need to do some setup because we've made changes because IRS has told us what to do. It's easy for you to find this population of properties that you have in your portfolio that are truly average income, and do whatever adjustments accordingly based on what we find out.
I feel like we're working on the theory, if you build it, they will come.
Yes.
So the IRS is, somehow they know that we're patiently waiting.
They're getting a brainwave from us that it's time.
All right. This is how you set up your edit multi-building project. That's an option in your left navigation panel for your selected property. And as we mentioned before, you can have more than one project per property with different bins. And what's going to happen when you go in here to create a new one, all the bins that are not part of a multi-building project and have that 8B box selected on the bin will display in here for you to add to the project as you wish. For this particular scenario, we've just added all the bins, and it's just going to be one property or one project to allow transfers between buildings for tenants.
And if you happen to be, I know we've got a couple agencies that they just don't allow multi-building projects because it's sort of highly complex and kind of adds some craziness to the scenario. If you're in that scenario and that's your case, you just ignore multi-building projects. You just don't have to use them at all.
Nope, you can just pretend they're not there.
It's not required for you to define anything there.
No. All right, so locations. Now, sometimes when you set up a property in the beginning and you have all locations same selected on it, what that's going to do, it's going to create the location and pull in the data from edit property. That will also automatically select all buildings same. So if you have one location with multiple buildings, you're going to have to go into edit property location and uncheck that all buildings same and save it in the event that you're going to add multiple buildings to one location. When that's checked, you can't create another record. You can't go over the event limit. So the system will let you know that, no, you can't do that. So anytime you get an error on somewhere about, all buildings same or all locations same is somewhere in that red and pink error, look at your location, your edit location and your edit property to see what kind of combination of checkboxes you have set up in that property. Then we have your buildings. Again, in a perfect world, when you have done a PP update from TC to portfolio property, most of this data will be transferred over. In the event that it's not, obviously, the required fields that we have marked by a red asterisk in here that you have to enter: the building name, location name, physical address, county, most important. It needs that for the income and rent limits. Your place and service date, which is going to be something HUD's going to be looking for at the end of the year, and your BIN number, which is going to tie your building to your compliance. Yes.
Remember that place and service date, particularly for our LIHTC properties, that really helps us in determining whether or not the income limits that we're going to use are HERA or not. So
true. So if
just
it's
to remind everybody,
January 2009, it's going to be HERA.
It's going to go HERA. It's going to grab the HERA limits, and then it's going to use the best ones over the time period. And
by best, you mean lowest, most beneficial to the tenant. Correct.
Highest, most beneficial
highest
to the owner agent. Yep. Yeah.
Oh,
yep.
Okay.
It's designed to give the owner agent a little break, a little breather better when in that time period of years, if the limits do go up, they're allowed to use those. So.
Okay, cool. All right. Also, it's a good time to remind you, we're all patiently waiting for HUD to publish their MTSP limits for 2022. I think we were all waiting for them. What one of our, Lori mentioned Friday, April Fool's Day. Of course, they weren't going to put them then. So this is where your building data goes. Even if you don't put in the total units, and that's kind of what you want kind of recorded for reporting, you will see your total calculated units and total calculated active units once your units have been added to a building. Now, we've talked about how to create data using Smart Docs. This is a Smart Docs template that we've created, or I've created, so you can create a ton of buildings at one time. If you are an agency that has not transferred over all your data from TCA and you have to add these buildings manually, or, say you have, and we've had this happen, 80 buildings that you have to create for one property, and you get that rent roll and it's like, it's got like one building has 2 units in it because they're like duplex townhomes or something. And you look at that rent roll and you're like, I have to create 80 buildings. Not exactly. What you can do is you can take this template, and this is something that if you're interested in making this part of your process, we can set up some time to go over the specifics of how to make this work for you and save you a lot of time. Because, you can open the Smart Doc, save it with a property name, and then do a get on that property. And then you can start entering in your data for your building names, your addresses, the units, et cetera, county, state, zip. Then you can just send that up to ProLink and you have all your buildings that are stubbed out. Someone has recently asked, can you create your buildings and units at the same time? No, you cannot. Unfortunately, Smart Docs requires that what we call the parent object exists in the system before it can upload any additional data to it. That is something I sadly learned the hard way, as I had a lovely template with like 20 buildings and 100 units per building. And I just send, and it's like, no, you don't have any buildings. We can't find this building of which you speak. So one of the nuances of Smart Docs is it's great when you know the nuances and it works, and it saves a lot of time. Now, if you're manually entering units, because say you have a property that only has 5 units, so it's like, I'll just add them manually. Obviously, when you create your units, all that you need to do is put in the required fields. If you just have one location, it's going to automatically populate that when you create the unit. If it just has one building, it's going to do the same. If you have more than one building, you have to select it. Unit number, bedroom, square feet, etc., is active. If this is not marked active, you're not going to see it in the tenant portal when you have your compliance reviews created. And if someone's entering it manually, they're not going to be able to find it. And if it's marked as an active, you're going to get an exception saying this has a tenant event, but it's not active. Then we have the programs grid. This will display after you've run evaluations. You do not manually check anything on this grid, even the initial. It's all going to take that information from your tenant events and your compliance reviews when you import and evaluate. The tenant events tab. Now, I'm pretty sure that everybody is familiar with this on your unit and your tenant events. This kind of lets you know internally as an agency, if your asset managers can look at this and see these are all the events they have. This is a great example of everything's kind of in order as it should be. You've seen validation errors that owner agents get when it's like, you can't have only a move in or a transfer in. Can happen after a move out when someone's trying to throw a recert after a move out. And you're like, why is it doing that? You can go into the back office in ProLinkHFA, look at that unit, and you'll be able to find the one that needs to be corrected or removed, and let your owner agent know this is your problem. You need to take care of this, and then resubmit your tenant events. And a lot of times, when you do it, even if you do an XML import, and they go in here and you see it's going to show, even if they haven't submitted, it's still going to show the events that exist, and you will be able to let them know what needs to be fixed, and they can go in and make the manual updates and revalidate if they need to do that. Then we have what I call the magical unit creation Smart Docs template. And this is, if you do have, okay, now you've created your gazillion buildings, you have 10 buildings, and let's say each building has 100 units on it. And you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. And the owner agent will send you a rent roll. And what you can do is you can take a template and you can do a get, and it's going to pull in all your buildings and all your building information so you know what you're working with. But again, there's a nuance to this, so you're not disappointed the first time you do it. We always kind of clarify all the buildings need to be created on ProLinkHFA properties before you do a get and attempt to add units. So we're going to do a quick exercise right here to kind of show you what I'm talking about. Oh boy. How do I get rid of this?
Click on the green, you're sharing your screen. Yeah.
Right there. We're trying to figure out how to get rid of this little bar up here.
They can't see it.
Okay, they can't see it. Then
Just
I'll
minimize your
this one.
Smart Docs, yeah.
There we go. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to log into our demo area.
Theoretically, it should use single sign-on
I hope so.
for you.
Look at that.
So just a quick
Go
kind
ahead.
of interesting
Please do.
piece there. You saw that kind of flash of that modal that said SAML login. Maybe some of you caught that. That is Smart Docs using single sign-on functionality. Just so that folks know, I know some of you use that today, so you're familiar with just going right into Smart Docs and not having to log in. Others of you may not be using single sign-on, and so you might be wondering, how come Sarah didn't have to sign in? That's why we've got single sign-on activated for us now, even for our demonstration environment. So
Yeah, and the first time I saw it, I was like, what is going on? What is my computer? Oh, so it's a good thing.
yeah, kind of snazzy.
So we're going to do a get, and basically this little exercise is to show you what happens when you try to add units to a building that doesn't exist yet. Because I know that a lot of times if you do get a Smart Docs error, some of them are really hard to interpret because you're like, what are you talking about? Because it's kind of speaking to you in database, which wasn't helpful, but more often you see these. You can at least get like one word out of that. Like, oh, I think I know what that's has something to do with. I think this might be something to do with the building. Apologies for.
Lots of data coming in.
I know it's fighting. It's the first time. It's very excited. It's because it's a big template. Okay. So here on this particular one, I have, you can see the building name is pulled in here. I hadn't put the address on this building yet. And then we have a building name and the bin and the address here. So let's say your rent roll comes in. It's like, oh, okay, I want to make this building 3. Now, if you're familiar with any templates I've made, my own kind of subconscious color coding is blue is just a get. And then green is a both. So even if I put information in here, it's not going to send, and it's not going to create a building from this because these are get only. And even if it was, it wouldn't allow me to create the units. So if I'm putting in, oh, okay, so I have this 3rd building, I'm going to put my data in over here. I'm going to add these 3 units to building 3 because we have a 3rd building. And then we can do this. If you have to do true for a lot, some of you may know the little plus sign drag down for Excel. So here I've added this for the 3rd building. Now I'm all excited because I'm going to hit send and it's going to ask for the attribute. And then it's going to yell at us. Building name is required on a PP buildings record. On a unit validation or on a unit. And basically it's throwing a building name is required on a unit for each of the 3 units. I just tried to send out because there's no building that exists. So basically it's telling you, of course, it's not that clear. There's no building of ProLink HFA for this unit to be attached to. So you need to go create a building before we can do this. And the bad thing about this is, especially if you've already put in a lot of units in this scenario, and then you get this error and you have to do a get to connect everything and you have to put that data in all again, that can be frustrating and time consuming. And we have all done it. Well, maybe not all of us, but I know some of us have done it. And some of you may be on right now. But that's kind of why it's important to make sure you have all your buildings created and you do a get before you try to update the units and all that information and do a send up. Now we go back to our PowerPoint, right? All right. Utility allowances.
We're going to switch drivers here for a second, everybody. So bear with us for just a moment. Thinking about utility allowances. So, some of you might be utilizing utility allowances in your compliance reviews. Some of you might not be. Some of you might be collecting the utility allowance information already. Some of you might not be. But a refresher around the utility allowances is that you can actually add your utility allowances both at your property level, okay? And then you can also add what we call a building override. So, if you have a property that has, let's say, 10 buildings maybe, and maybe one of those buildings is, older than the other 9. So it has kind of some different utility use going on. You can add these different, numbers for the different types of utilities that you want to use for that particular building. And likewise, if you have a property that's got, like, let's say, again, 10 buildings and 2 of those buildings are newer. And so they're more energy efficient. And so they might have some different utility allowances than maybe those older 8 buildings in the property. Again, use that building override to create those different numbers, those different requirements of the allowances for just those couple of buildings in that property. So in terms of, entering that data, and I know, some of us have kind of talked together previously about kind of the volume of data that's involved with utility allowances. And the idea that it's, because of that volume of data, it's a little bit hard to keep up, with utility allowances. So again, we do have a smart doc here that you can see on the screen. Now, this version that I have is not as pretty as the one that Sarah has, but
all we got to do is shade it.
Yep, right. We might add in the color coding, but point being is that if you do need a smart doc template to help collect the utility allowance data from your owner agent, just reach out, give us a holler. We can provide this as kind of a starter template for you. One thing that I want to be sure to mention is that same concept here with this Smart Docs template for utility allowances in terms of entering your property level utility allowances and then your building level. So your property level have to exist first before you can add those building overrides. So if you wanted to collect both, you'd want to do 2 separate templates. Get your property level created first in the system. Then with that building level override template, like we saw Sarah do, you do a get into that building level. And then that would then enable your owner agent to then select for each building what the property level utility allowance is that they're overriding. So let's look at that live for just a second, because I kind of want to remind everybody basically how that works. So I think I have a property set up with some utility allowances. Let me do a little search here in the system. Oh, goodness, what's going on here? Did we time out?
We might have.
Let me log back in, guys. Sorry about that.
You forgot to log on .aspx.
I forget we're doing single sign-on. And
If I point at my screen, everybody can see it now.
how come I don't have connectivity now? Well, I can't type, that's why.
Oh.
There's that. The thing wants you to be able to type.
Troubleshooting 101, make sure it's not you.
Okay, you all know that I can't type and talk at the same time. We've gone through that about 1,000,000 times. Okay, so here we come. Let's just hop right into Garden Court because I think I've got some decent data here. So again, property level right now, and I'm looking at my utility allowances. So you can see that I have, 2, 5, 4, 1 through 5, roughly missing 3 utility allowances created in the system, effective date of 1/1/2021, right? So if I were to run my compliance reviews for my 2021 period, the system can use these property level utility allowances to test, right, the number that comes in on those tenant events. Now, a couple things to think about. I do need to have an approved date entered on these utility allowances in order for those to be used in my compliance reviews. And we'll look at an example of where you can see like my 1-bedroom UA, although I do have some information there in the system, I don't have it approved, number one. And then number two, you can also notice that I don't have a utility allowance record entered into the system for a 3-bedroom type of unit. Okay, so that's kind of 2 different scenarios that can kind of exist in the system for that, evaluation of the utility allowances that I will see in a compliance review. I'll see exceptions for, and we'll look at an example of what those look like here in just a minute. But I want to take us in then. So remember, this is my property level. So let's go ahead and scroll down here, right at my property level, and I can see the existing building overrides that I currently have entered into the system. Okay. I don't actually have to like travel to a particular building or figure out which one. They're listed here right at the property level for me.
And when you're on the building, you'll see the property.
Yes, you absolutely will. So I'll go ahead and I can click into this building level. So you'll note that this is an override here, right? So before I click in, what I'm saying is that for building 165, I have a different utility allowance for my 2-bedroom units. Okay, I'm saying the electric and gas in this building for 2-bedroom units, I'm allowing 130, where for the rest of my property, for my 2-bedroom units, I'm allowing 140. Okay, so, whatever that difference is, up or down, it doesn't matter. You can make those overrides either way. So then when I click in this building override row here, you can see I go into the detail record, right? In my building 165, I can see that in my header there. I can see that I'm in building 165. And so just to kind of show, when I'm doing these overrides, what this edit screen looks like is I can see the utility allowances that are entered for the property level. And so that's what I'm choosing. I'm saying, hey, when I'm making a building override, I'm going to override, in this case, the 2-bedroom utility allowance that's defined at the property level. And so then you're saying I'm overriding the 2-bedroom electric and gas for the property overall. It's 140. For this particular building, it's only 130. Okay. And so then when I go to the building itself, let me drill in, and I have a utility allowances tab here as well. I can see here's the specific override for my particular building. And then down below, I see what I have entered at the property level. Okay. So just a little distinction and clarification there. Let's hop back into this PowerPoint. So again, if you need a little sample, a little starter set of SmartDocs templates for this utility allowance information, reach out and we can get you a little starter, get you going on that. So remember, we talked about this idea of when we've got that utility allowance data entered into the system, and then we actually start evaluating our compliance reviews, there's a couple of different types of exceptions that we might see. Okay, so the examples are number one here is where we're saying the utility allowance amount that's coming in on the tenant event doesn't equal the approved amount. So what's going on there is, whatever this unit is, the tenant event came in with a utility allowance amount, and that amount entered is either above or below what is approved for that particular bedroom type for that property and or possibly building, because we might have a building override. Okay, so that first example there is like really saying to you, the utility allowance that's being submitted is not allowed, right? It's not valid. Okay. Now, the other types of exceptions that you're going to see are this second example here, where the system is telling us, hey, there's no approved utility allowance record for this tenant event. So remember, we talked about this idea that could be one of two things. That could be that you do not have a utility allowance record entered for that property, for that bedroom type at all, right? And on that tenant event, there's a utility allowance amount. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
And so, that's being submitted with a tenant event, but we don't have a record to, validate against, right? And so not having that utility allowance record, there's a little bit two flavors of that, right? Either the record fully just does not exist, it was not entered into the system, or we might have that record, but we haven't approved it yet. Okay, so a couple flavors there. And then of course, and I think probably most of you that are doing evaluations are pretty familiar with the idea that in your compliance review, year by year, property by property, you can elect to not test your utility allowances. Okay, so what that does for you, and I'm sure lots of you have experienced this, when you don't have the information entered for your utility allowances and you run an evaluation, you get, buku of version number 2 of the exception here, like for every event. And it's distracting when you're not really ready, right, to be evaluating the utility allowances. So you can turn that off. But I think the beauty of this turning it off or turning it on is that this allows you to, number one, in the year that you're ready to start doing the evaluation of the utility allowances, you just stop turning it off. But also you can do this property by property. So if you're getting ready to kind of spin up on utility allowances, and maybe you have a couple properties who are willing to participate with you and kind of get up and running on this, you can work with just those couple properties in a given compliance year, where you can turn all the others off. So that's kind of the nicety there of being able to really control that at that compliance review level, rather than having to, do that across your entire portfolio. And then again, as you kind of get that part of your program up and running and get this information in, property by property, then you start, turning on that testing property by property until you've got, your whole portfolio up and running. So I think that's all for utility allowances. So I'm going to turn it back over to Sarah for more on compliance reviews.
Okay, so let's go back to creating compliance reviews. And I'm fairly certain that everyone's kind of familiar with the utilities we have. They'll go out and automatically stub out your reviews for all of your active properties that have active programs during the specified compliance period. If you don't, and you've been creating them like, one by one in each property, you're going to love this. This will be thrilling for you if you don't already know about it. And so all you have to do is go into utilities and enter, let's say, you've got about 100 properties. They're all active with LIHTC. Half of them are active with home. Once you put in your compliance period start date and compliance period end date, which generally I've noticed is January 1st to December 31st in most cases, not all, but most, it's going to create a compliance record for every property out there for the year, that compliance period 2023. Now, if you put in the wrong date and create a lot of reviews of the wrong dates, can you magically undo it? No.
You'll have to do it manually, right?
You'll have to go in and update those manually. That would be terrible.
The thing that this kind of offers you, though, is that ability to get all those compliance reviews created for that year. So then those records exist in the system. So then you can use your data views to monitor, okay, I'm compliance officer, whoever I am, which ones are mine. I can see what the status is then of my compliance reviews. What have I started? What have I not started? And that kind of thing. So that's kind of where that utility lends itself to help you create that monitoring tool.
Got it. So if you have already created the compliance period and you decide you want to add some file types to that, and that's all you want to do, or you forgot, or we've decided this year we want to do this, you could go into this utility and select, the period and which files you want to add and just create the files. Now, if you do, create your views again and the records already exist, it's not going to create a duplicate record. But let's say that, in January, you have created all the compliance reviews for all your active properties. Then by May, for some reason, you have like 50 more. You could go out here and do this again, and it's only going to update the new properties that do not have that existing compliance period review. Mm-hmm. Breathe. Hopefully we're not talking too fast. I think someone would have said something.
I think so, yeah.
Good. And now we're over to the actual main tab of the compliance review, which I know everybody's familiar with by now. You know what evaluate does, what finalize does. And you also know that sometimes if you've evaluated and you're ready to go, you've overridden all your comments and the finalize button is enabled. Some tooltips are more helpful than others, and we should have all the tooltips you would possibly need coming up this year. Anytime it's telling you you're missing something, whether it's lock fixed units or the compliance file tracking records that you've entered. Tenant event submission status, this lets you know, as most of you know, where you need to say, hey, owner agent, you all haven't submitted them yet. It may just be as simple as they didn't realize they needed to validate and submit in the tenant portal in their scenario, or they're just behind. And most of you also know that once the tenant submits these, you can't delete any events, and they can't make any edits in the tenant portal because they can't get to the screen where they make those changes. So in most cases, when you go through and you find data, you have to set it back to pending and let them know so they can go in and make any updates that they need to. We also talked about the test utility allowances. Now we do have a config setting that displays this. So if you don't see this on your compliance reviews, that's because someone in your agency has set that config setting to false. So don't panic, it's okay.
Correct. And if you have trouble knowing or finding what that config setting is, just holler and we'll get you pointed in the right direction.
When you decide you want to start testing them, same thing. We can show you where.
Mhm.
I believe that is all for this particular screen. LIHTC tab. We're all familiar with the LIHTC tab, and that's where we see our exceptions and we see our applicable fraction status. What you may or may not know, and I don't know how many, I do know a couple of clients who definitely do use this, but let's say, for example, and we can use COVID as an example.
Mhm.
If you have your compliance program set up to where it's requiring research every year and you evaluated for 2021 or 2020, and there were tons of recertifications missing, and that was going to drop down your applicable fraction and everything just so it didn't pass. Once you override all the exceptions and save the record, you can hit the calculate APSA button, which Kelly and I decided should say AFSA.
Mhm.
So that will be changing soon. And it will recalculate and take all those exceptions out of the numerator, I guess, for things that failed. So it's going to bring up your applicable fraction and pass your compliance review because, and you could just put comments in there due to COVID or, not requiring recertifications this year.
Mhm.
So that's a good way to, if you're worried about making sure everything passed and all your calculations are correct, you would just calculate a PSA and that would do that for you. Then we have on the home screen, different information, but the same idea. We have our compliance exceptions down here that tells you what's going on and what you need to update, what you need to look at, whether you need more information from the owner agent, they haven't provided enough, or they need to make edits to it. It's going to tell you how many were high and how many are low. And it's going to tell you if it passed or failed based on how many home units that you've indicated on the program that are going to be tested.
Mhm. And then also, you can see on this home screen, there's another table there that's that compliance messages. So what happens there is, at least right now, and there may be only kind of one option for this right now that I can remember. But if you have a particular config setting turned on that says only test my program funds rule in the first year of my home program, if you have that selected, then that exception message that you're kind of seeing third from the bottom there in the exceptions list, that would actually display in that messages section. And so, like I said, that's the only one that I can dream up right now that's working that way. There could be one or two others that I'm forgetting about. However, that's what that compliance messages area is all about, is like, hey, listen, based on the information that's submitted for this time period, for this property, here's something that we see going on and we just want you to know about it.
FYI.
Right? Just, if you want to think about it, think about it. If you don't, you can just scoot right past it. So that's what that kind of messages area is all about. And we are looking at the possibility of adding that to the LIHTC tab that may come later this year, but we'll kind of see how that goes.
And that's just like, okay, this isn't a requirement, but you might want to look at this because you might care that this is doing something a little weird.
Yeah, right? Like based on the information that we have, maybe you want to take a look and see what's going on. So.
Okay. That is cool. All right. So now we're to everybody's favorite, the tenant portal. We're going to go over this more later, so I'm not going to get too in depth, but I think something that, when your owner agents go into the tenant portal, there's a lot of information right there for them to check. We submitted a feature that we're hoping this year to add like the actual property name, like right above the units grid, because there can sometimes be a discrepancy between what ProLinkHFA has as the property name, what you've named your work center, and what they have it as. So if we have something in there that says your property name needs to look like this, then that will take care of that, along with the building address in the bin format. So, there's a lot of information there that they can verify, so they don't have to ask you, well, what's in your system? Well, just look at this page and there it is for you. We're helping them to help themselves and get their events and everything entered as quick as possible with as little roadblocks as possible. And now it's your turn.
Okay. Little switcheroo here again. So as promised, we're going to take a look at our additional set-asides program. So let's talk first about like, why would you use the additional set-asides program? So the examples or the reasons that you would use this is, if you're a state that participates or has a state LIHTC program, you'll define your set-aside here in your additional set-asides.
But before we get started, I think it's very clear because we need to reiterate, this is not going to use LIHTC rules. It's not going to generate LIHTC exceptions. It's just going to test income and rent.
Exactly.
Correct?
Yes.
And just always remember that. I know we're throwing LIHTC around here, but it's not using any LIHTC rules. It's just
in this tab, right?
On this program. It's a completely separate program from LIHTC.
Exactly. Yes. So another example, deeper targeting in your federal programs. So as Sarah mentions, right? If you define, say for your LIHTC program, you have deeper targeting, right? You'll define that deeper targeting, those deeper set-asides here in your additional set-asides program. However, you would still have your LIHTC program set up and testing, you still have to elect for the bin, the federal requirement of what set aside they're meeting, right? The 20 at 50 or the 40 at 60, that's still going to be tested at the, federal requirement. But then this additional set aside can test that deeper targeting that you have. Now, additionally, keeping that LIHTC program defined, test the other LIHTC rules, student rules, next available unit. Recertification
Gross
requirements,
income.
That kind of stuff, right? So really this additional set aside, it's really, kind of like the name alludes to, it's really about defining the set aside, right? Another example is, any of your agency specific programs, like maybe you have a special needs program that you need to define, or
deeper SKU, right?
No, deeper SKU is part of your LIHTC, okay. But any of your agency funding that has gone into this property that brings some kind of income or rent requirement with it, you can define that in your additional set asides. Okay. And then finally, average income testing. So this is the example that I have displayed here in this screenshot, but let's just go live in the system and look at it live here. So I'm still within my Garden Court Apartments property. And so I'm going to hop into my compliance programs menu item, and then I'm going to click into my additional set-asides program. So what we're seeing here is where I'm defining my additional set-asides, my additional programs. Now, you'll see that I have these indicated as layer types, and this naming, let me click into a detail row here. The naming that I choose for my layer type, my program, I choose this from a pick list. And this is one of those pick lists where you all are in control of the values that are offered here. Okay. So you would define this pick list for your agency with your various programs that you would want to record here in your additional set asides. Okay. So let's go back out to this kind of higher level so that we can see kind of this complete definition. So what's going on here is I'm defining the layers that make up my average income program for this property. Okay. So I've got 5 units required at my 40% band, 6 at my 50, 7 at my 60, 8 at my 30, 10 at my 70, 15 at my 80. Okay. And so I know, that's just, it's defining those particular bands, right? With those numbers of units that average out, right, to that 60% AMI. Okay. I know a lot of you today are, in terms of spinning up an average income program, you're having this definition of bands and what they need to be is actually included in your funding applications, right? I've seen that a lot coming through from a lot of you. So that's what this additional set aside program is you take that detail out of that funding application. Of course, the latest version that really is agreed to, right? Where your agreement is built off of, but that's where you pull that information from. And you set that up right here in your additional set asides program. And then this way you're testing at these bands that you have defined that this property has agreed to, and at the unit counts that they've agreed for each of those bands, right? So at least at this level, you're doing the test of meeting the income and the rent. Okay. Now, obviously, this is not, thinking about or considering any kind of fixed units, right? Because we don't know yet. We don't know if that's going to stick. We don't know what the IRS is going to tell us to do with that yet. So we're not even messing around with that right now. All we're doing here is saying, okay, property, are you meeting the unit counts, the numbers of units at the bands that you agreed to that gives that average of 60% AMI? Okay. And again, harvest this out of your funding applications. And so, folks, if you're, for whatever reason, if your production folks, your pipeline folks are not recording that detail for you in the funding applications, if you need some help kind of laying this out, I put together a little spreadsheet for myself to calculate out what this average would be. Based on, and I did this based on my total units. I've got 51 units in my property. So I did this based on, say I've got an applicable fraction that's 100% LIHTC. But if you need some help setting up your program, reach out, holler at me, and we can work on getting this put together for you. So that you can at least you're testing those unit counts, right, in the specific bands, right, that they need to be meeting for that property. And this is, like I said, this is our interim solution until we, get some more detail from the IRS. But that's, that's a fine example of using an additional set aside program. And then you can kind of imagine, how you would use that potentially for, other of your agency specific programs. If you had special needs, how many, let's go back and actually look at what we can do with that special needs. You've got a program that says, I need to have so many units, in this particular property, need to serve elderly, displaced, whatever your program is. You define that using that special needs designation. And again, remember, this drop down is in your control. So you can include the items that your specific program addresses. And then that detail comes through in the tenant event. And you can at least test then, okay, this property is truly offering and populating, N number of units in the property with what they agreed to. Okay. And then, likewise, any other programs that you have that bring either income restrictions or rent restrictions or both. And remember, with these additional set aside programs, you can do either or or both in terms of income and rent. If you have a program that simply restricts rent, that's okay. You can build a set aside that simply tests those rent restrictions are being met, okay, based on the tenant event information that that property is submitting. Okay, so if you have, programs that you're not exactly sure how to set up, but you want to be evaluated within your compliance reviews, again, reach out, we can work with you and help you get these set up so that you really are, testing those events for all the programs that you need to be in those evaluations. Okay, I think that's about it for additional set asides. Oh, one other thing to note, when you do have those programs set up, whether you have one additional set aside or multiples, when those are evaluated in your review, you do get specific exceptions that tell you, whichever layer is not being met, whether income or rent, it's described to you that it's not being met. And let's look just one more time at that compliance review and just be reminded that we do have a separate tab for the additional set aside. So remember, today we've kind of looked at, our home tab, right? In our compliance review, our LIHTC tab. We also have our additional set asides. Now you're only going to see this tab if you actually have something, your additional set aside program defined, right? And so that tab, it shows you whatever, programs or layer types that you have defined. And then just like we see on the other tabs, it's going to list for you, whatever you're not meeting, okay, in terms of those various different layers, okay? And then I think that's really it for additional set aside. So I'll go ahead and turn it back over to Sarah.
Yes, the moments we've all been waiting for, our celebratory compliance season event. Okay, so the tenant event import. I know that when you first start using, and even if you've been using the tenant event import for a long time, every now and then there's an import error that an owner agent will receive. And they'll be like, I have no idea what this is. We've tried to make some improvements this year by adding unit numbers to those errors so you can track them down more easily and let the owner agent know, or they could actually read the import and figure out what's going on. We have talked about tentatively planning a thorough training for owner agents next January about how to do this, how to do that, if this happens. So we can kind of provide that to them so you don't have to, but we will, I know.
We'll keep you updated on how we progress on that. Like,
unless somebody talks us out of it, I really think
it'd have to be something recorded, that you could share.
Yeah,
we could with your owner agents.
We could basically have do a demo like this, go through these things, have people attend if they can and ask questions, and then just put it out there. You can find somewhere to put it on Procorem for your owner agents.
And if you have, particular requests about what a training like that could include, like there's a specific sort of question that you get seemingly hundreds of times in a season or year over year, shoot those out to us, and we can definitely make sure that we include those kind of things. But we're gonna do it. We're gonna give it a shot and see what we can come up with, and whether or not you all think that would be valuable. So we'll keep you posted.
So. Okay, so we're just going to go through some various items and exceptions that seem to come up a lot, and what they are caused by. So in this example, the errors like data at the root level is invalid, because that's real descriptive and helpful. So basically what that is, and this is an XML thing, this isn't an us thing, it's an incorrect file format. And so you can look here in the screenshot and see that's a zip file. And these are things that have actually happened. These aren't, fictional. These are true stories. And I feel like I'm about to go into a TV show. Anyway, yes, these are the real life stories of things that have happened. And what you can do is you can go into ProLinkHFA in case it's not obvious to you, because sometimes it won't be obvious. You just won't even look at it. But, if you go into the file attachment screen for that property where they try to upload those, it's going to show you the name of the file that was uploaded and what time they did it. So even though it failed, ProLink's going to take that file and just be like, so you can look at it like, see, this is bad. I'm proving it to you. So that's kind of how, if the data at the root level is invalid, there's something wrong with that document. If it's an XML, I've seen it to where it's been the incorrect report that they've pulled and tried to generate. So it's a case-by-case basis, but usually data invalid means file very much bad. All right, so next one. Reporting start date and imported file does not fall within the compliance review start and end dates for this compliance review. Basically, this straight up means they have the reporting dates wrong. It has to be from in this example, they're actually trying to upload in the 2021 compliance period. So the dates are going to be incorrect. So if you see, and another thing that we've discovered this week is that, also there's a chance you'll see a message like, it doesn't match the compliance review end date. The first thing you do is go and look at your compliance programs and your compliance reviews and make sure the dates are valid. And then, because you may have put in the wrong end date for the compliance period for whatever reason, because we all struggle with typing. It's not natural. And then navigate to files on the property and you can see what year the tenant event was for. Like it will tell you, okay, so they tried to import this particular document and it's an XML file, so that's legitimate, but it's for 2020 and they tried to put it into 2021. So then you say, no, you need to go back into the tenant portal and make sure that you selected the correct year. This is one of the reasons we want to kind of give owner agent training to make sure they understand how to do this. And for those of you who do like to get into the XML and poke around, that's how we know this is wrong. I did give the wrong example. It was for 2019 and I tried to upload for 2021, but you get the idea. This period should match the period that they're updating in the tenant portal.
Yes.
All right, so next one, property name and imported file does not match the property for this compliance review. Everybody's favorite. Property name mismatch. And we know we've gone through this over the past year and a half to where we know that the XML can be really picky. On the bright side, and I address this later, we've kind of removed capitalization and case from this, from the words. Now it's just characters, hyphens, spaces, etc. So you can see here for this particular property that I have 1900 Bosquet Avenue. And so this is how they have it in their system. They've got AVE instead of Avenue. And this is obviously something you see in building addresses as well. But so what they would have to do at this point, owner agent, this is the property name. Please update this in your property management system. Again, if we can provide that property name right on that screen, so when they get that error, then you're like, okay, well, we need to update it. That might put an end to some of the back and forth and they run into these property issues.
Mm-hmm. They won't have to come to you or to us to ask about what should the property name be.
Right. And it's not that we mind helping. It's just, sometimes they have to wait for people to get back to them. And it's just, it gets in the way of getting their work done, and I understand that. And we want to help everybody get their work done. Because we're all working for the weekend. Yes. Unmatched bin. So this means the bin is incorrect in the XML file in their system. Now, sometimes I know I had a ticket a couple of days ago where it was like basically unmatched bin and it was just blank because they hadn't put in a bin at all in the XML in their system for whatever reason. So it's like unmatched bin, blah. Everything. And so again, if they need to know the correct bin format, they can go in here and it will tell you in the error which bin is a problem. The unmatched bin is this. So this means whatever they put in their XML file isn't matching what we have right here. So the message does give a good indication of what the issue is. So in this situation, it would be like, owner agent, could you please update your system to match the bin you see on the screen right here? And then they would obviously have to update, regenerate. I know that sometimes owner agents have a hard time finding where the data comes from. At that point, you can feel very comfortable instructing them to call their software provider, whether it be URD, RealPage, or Boston Post, and have them, kind of tell them where that is. I think that's something that we're trying to do. So we spend less time and you spend less time trying to tell them how to use a system that we don't have access to.
Right.
That's probably,
and we don't want to tell them wrong because
No.
we don't have access. So, we know it's in there somewhere.
It's a huge blind spot. And I have been on a few calls with some owner agents and I've seen bits and pieces, but not enough to make me even, I cannot speak for other people's software. But sometimes we can work around it, and that's coming up next. There's one thing that we have to address. No building found with address of this. Again, it's an incorrect address. It must match exactly. If it's Avenue, it has to be Avenue in their system. If it's AVE in your system, it has to be AVE in their system. It has to match character by character. So again, when you have this information over here, sometimes we do have the building address too, which I believe I suggested. I put in a feature idea to add that as well, because sometimes you'll have building address 1 and then someone puts building A in that, and that needs to be all one thing in the XML.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a good place for them to go to be like, okay, this is where I have the address wrong. At least one program must be selected if unit type is low income. The good news is that this is one of those errors that do have the unit on it. So the owner agent should be able to look at this import error and say, Unit 101 does not have a program selected for a low income unit. And that basically means that the unit is designated low income and it does not have a program selected on it. And this is what it looks like in the XML, because I don't know what it looks like in their system. But basically, it's a low income unit, you have to have a tax credit or home unit selected. 1 is a yes, 2 is a no. That's, XML speak for that.
And they could have both.
They can have both, because then it would be 1, or they could just have home, or tax credit would be 2, or home would be 1. But regardless, if the unit type is low income, they have to mark that as either tax credit or home.
Mm-hmm.
All right, what else do we have? Okay, this one's been annoying this year because income type is missing has come up a few times. This is one, and when we did the great add unit number to error project last year, we tried to get as many as we could. This was one that we missed. So there is a bug in there for this that will be coming. Okay. So I went back, apologies. There we go. What this means is when you go in, like when I compare this to what we do in Tenant Portal, when you select an income, and you type in, okay, this is the income. What type of income is it? Is it check, or is it Social Security? Is it non-federal wages? Is it supplemental income? They absolutely have to choose one of those in their system in order to generate the proper NAMA code.
And you make a good point, Sarah, when you say NAMA code. That list, right, is defined by that NAMA XML. So we all have to kind of play to that same rule with what we're sharing there back and forth.
Yeah, because I feel like we had a ticket about someone was putting in AS for income type or income verification source. I haven't looked at those, but AS is not an income type. Alimony is covered by the N, other non-wage source. So this is kind of, they should have those options in their system, because the property management system should be using the NAMA values as well. So you'd have to instruct the owner agent to be like, you need to make sure there's an income type. Is there a manual workaround? Can you update the XML? Yes, you can. But I think we all want to get out of the habit of having to be like part-time XML professionals to get through compliance season. It's like, that's just one other hat we don't need. If we can get everybody in the groove of understanding how this one value goes to the other, it'll save us all time and sanity and gray hair.
Yes.
I guess I just speak for me on that one. All right, race, again, another one, race type combination is invalid. We're giving you the unit number. It's invalid combination of race types. And most of the time it's, it's fine, but there's some really simple, ways to address this. Like, again, NAMA has, these are all the valid race type choices. You can be Filipino and Korean. You can be Samoan and white. You can be Pacific Islander and other. That's fine. But if you put in tenant decline to respond, you can have nothing else there. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I'm white. No, I'm not. I'm not responding. It's too late because you already did. So this can cause a problem as well. So if the owner agent goes to the unit and find out I have TDR and a valid race type selected, can't do that. Problem. Same thing with missing. You can't say, "Oh, I am Filipino and I am missing." No, you're only Filipino because you've decided to select this option. And this again, NAMA is just like, no, if we don't like this, you have to pick one or the other. So that's why that happens. And again, you're just going to have to ask them to go to the unit and look and make sure that it matches what NAMA says. And again, we get to just NAMA said, do this, NAMA said.
And like you bring up another good point, Sarah, by kind of showing these examples of what these NAMA definitions are. If anybody needs to get to, these source files that Sarah's getting, reach out and we'll give you the link to get to the NAMA website so that you can look at always the latest and greatest of what these definition files are, what these, pick list values are. That's all available out there, and we can make sure you get those links and can get right to that information.
Yes, all right. So then we have, in the same vein of that, ethnicity type combinations and invalid. This is very similar because up here it's telling you what unit it's on. Okay. And this is what it looks like. And then we're going to go over, I know I had 4 things just pop up here. First of all, we have this comes from NAMA. And in the example we have here that could cause this particular error, it just says Puerto Rican. So it's and it clearly, and I spent a lot of time being like, what are they talking about when I first tried to test this? Mm-hmm. But it's basically, I was like, what? PRC MAC, if you have any of these 4 values, the problem with this particular one that we're looking at right here, it doesn't have an H because NAMA requires that H automatically be reported. I have no idea why. They just do. So that's the issue. Owner agent, this particular tenant on this particular property, one of them only has PR, but they need H. So this way they could look at that and oh, okay, that's just fine. Also applies if you've got a value selected, you can't put TDR and you can't put missing. You're either TDR and nothing else, you're missing or nothing else, or you're whatever the approved combinations. Now, I know last year we had a problem where, and with one of the Yardi files, depending on the version, if there was a move in, move out, move in on the same unit, and it looks like it was mostly market units, but there might be someone out there who would correct me if I'm wrong. It was generating the ethnicity values twice. And because you've put in missing and another value, the importer is like, nope, can't do that. It was choking on those. Unfortunately, there's no way to fix that other than to do it manually. So if you run into any of those issues for the rest of this year using less than 6.0 version of Yardi, let me know. All we have to do is remove the duplicate values, save, and the XML will be fine. I've noticed in version 6.0 for NAMA, I don't know if it's NAMA or Yardi's version, we do have 6.0. They upgrade, right? Yeah. That seems to have taken care of it. They have kind of moved the node around to where you just have 1. You can't select 2. It's just ethnicity, is disabled, it's disabled. So they have resolved that issue in their later versions, as per my observation, because they didn't answer when I tried to put in a bug.
Some folks, though, if they happen to be using an earlier version, it's possible that they could still run into this issue. So, shoot Sarah a ticket, a love note, I like to call it.
Right.
And she can help you get that XML straightened out.
Yeah. And that's, something else is like, as you work with owner agents and they ask, I know we're like, well, do I tell them to get the most recent version of the software? Yes. Yes, you do. They want to upgrade. They want to keep up with this. They don't want 2.0. And we've seen how many issues we get with 5. I don't know why 5 is annoying, but they want the latest version of the property management software they have. Because I know it's like you talk about 6.0, that kind of matches NAMA 6.0.
Yep.
And they try to stay in concert together. So yes, encourage your owner agents to make your life easier and their life easier to have the most recent that they can.
Absolutely. Great segue into this slide here. I don't really need to drive, Sarah, but
okay, we'll both drive.
We just wanted to make a mention, regarding NAMA. There was a working group session today. That working group session was recorded. And so we're still waiting to find out how to get that recording, but we will be sure to share that out via the user group work center in Procorem, either the recording itself or how you can access that recording. Please also note that if you want to sign up for that NAMA working group, there's a link here at the bottom of this slide where you can go and sign up and participate in that working group. So, please, if you're using the tenant portal and you've got partners that are using XML, it's good for you to participate in this group. This is where we ask for changes to that XML definition. Like, for example, one of the changes that we ProLink asked for today was to add the student use code at the household member level, right? And so the reason that we're asking for that is so that we can better use that for our home program, for our student rule testing. And so, as long as we come to the group, we make, a reasonable suggestion of how we could update the XML to, serve us better, those changes can get moved in and we can get those updates. And then, all the vendors can make those updates. And then it just makes that transfer and that sharing of data via XML easier. So
yeah,
again,
it's important for people who actually use the system to have input, correct?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. You all are on the ground every day, you hear and see what's going on. So your involvement is very much needed. So again, there's a link there at the bottom of the slide, and we'll make this slide deck available on the user group to y'all later on this afternoon or first thing tomorrow morning. It'll be available. So you've got the link there. You can sign up for that NAMA working group. And then remember, we'll also get access to the recording of that meeting that happened today. It started before this webinar and it kind of overlapped with this webinar. So that recording will be available for y'all.
All right. So now we have Q&A.
Okay. Right now, I don't see any
do we have anything over there?
Questions in the chat or the Q&A. So we'll leave this open here for a few minutes and see, if anybody's got any burning questions.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else we can talk about that might, while we're here, I'm going to, because I'm not sure who all is on this call, but I know that we have several clients who have had issues with, for whatever reason, a user was able to select low income and the LIHTC program wasn't available in the tenant portal or the back office. That I think is fallout from an original bug that we fixed sometime last year where the initial move-in program wasn't, or the initial period wasn't updating.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's been fixed. So at some point by, I want to say like last
build.
Maybe,
or build before.
You're not going to have that problem. For events that were entered prior to that fix, we might still have to do our little workaround. Yeah, and I have some tickets I need to get back on. Everybody just wants to go.
Yeah.
It's hump day.
So, a real quick reminder here, just, before we wrap up, you probably saw me send an invitation to you 2 times this week for our feature prototype review meeting that's happening on the 14th. I apologize for that. I accidentally deleted that meeting and I did have to send it out again. Again, my apologies. So you should see that invite. We'll go over feature prototype there. I did schedule a working group for one of the features. And so that post is out on the user group work center. So, give that a look if you're interested in participating. Please come along and join us for that. I think that's all I have in terms of announcements.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks, guys. Great job. I hope everybody learned something today, and we look forward to the next one. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. My connection keeps dropping on my side, so hopefully I get through these last couple minutes here. Again, Kelly, Sarah, thank you so much, and everybody for attending. We are going to be announcing our next webinar coming up, which is a Procorem use case. It's a webinar event, so it's going to be one of our 45-minute webinars on Wednesday coming up next month. So please attend that for Procorem best practices with communicating with your external partners. We'll have kind of a business use case aspect to that, and then we'll walk you through some of those practices in Procorem. So that is our next event, and then we will be announcing I guess by that it'll be announcing June's event after that, and then we expect to have our next training series like this in July. So that will be the next time we have a longer series. So thank you again for your time. We appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing from you. Please reach out to any one of us in the meantime, and we look forward to seeing you in our user group meetings. Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great rest
Have
of
a
your
great
week.
week.